Hey there, Ryan White here for High Point Music, and today we're going to talk about a big question. So this is one I've sort of come across a little bit in my experience of working with people, but the question is music theory necessary as a guitarist? So this one's a bit of a furry one, so I'd like to take a little bit of time to go through a few things, talk about my own personal experiences, which will hopefully be of use to you. And to that end, I want to talk about a few things, what music theory is, what I would deem a fundamental understanding of music theory as a guitarist, I think, specifically talking to people out there. Furthermore, I'd like to share some experiences from my work history in terms of where it's useful, where I believe it's helpful, and also where I believe it to be a hindrance. And then once we've sort of walked our way through those ideas, then we can actually get to the big question of, is it actually necessary as a guitarist? So music theory, in essence, is a theoretical understanding of music. It's a way to intellectually describe and analyze what happens as music. It doesn't encapsulate or doesn't capture, I don't believe you can capture what is music in theoretical ideas. You can look at what's going on in terms of a harmony or rhythmic perspective, analyze it, draw your own conclusions, but there's a certain part which is just, I haven't thought about it, but it's too much to define it in a sense, but it's like there's something in the ether, it's the emotion, and that's something which is not theoretical or explained in theory in my experience. So when I'm talking about music theory as a guitarist, what I would deem that to be is somewhat like reading, a basic understanding of reading. Guitar's a bit of a tricky instrument to be able to read just because of the layout of it, but there's other benefits of being guitar players in terms of our scale layouts and whatnot. But reading, being able to understand and get your way through chord charts, and having a basic understanding of key centers, how that works. So you can look at a piece of music and sort of, work out when it's modulating from key to key. I think that's important in my opinion and my experience. Okay, so that brings us to the next step. So music theory, where is it helpful? So going from my direct experience, music theory is helpful to be able to communicate your ideas. So whether that be in a composition sense, whether you're trying to explain something else in a theoretical sense to someone. So that's very important. So, and when I say composition, I think as time changes, and I've seen just in my own experience with writing and production work, if you want to work with, say, string players or an orchestra or woodwind players or a jazz ensemble jazz ensemble, having the ability to be able to communicate your ideas, in notation is very handy. It's not the only way to do it, which is what's wonderful these days. You can, if you're a sufficient enough keyboard player, or you're handy with a computer and composing that way, you can get your ideas across. But in my experience, it's helpful to be able to get your ideas down, and also in studio sessions, be able to talk about arrangements from that perspective to communicate the ideas to the musicians or the arrangers or the conductors or whatnot. So that's one way it's useful. Another area which I believe it to be useful, and I think is the most vital area to have an understanding of it, is actually having the ability to analyze what's going on. And specifically as guitar players, this is one problem not a problem, but a hindrance I see to certain musicians that I've worked with over the years, helping them with their playing is, for example, I've had one player who's very, very experienced player. He's been playing for multiple decades, tons of gigs. So he's at a professional level. He's a high-level player, very, very good guitarist. But one thing I see, and I've come across this, and his theoretical understanding is very basic. So he might do something, or he might hear something in a song, or he might work out a solo, which and it has something he likes, but he struggles to incorporate that or know how to take that idea and be able to use it in other contexts. And I think having that ability to analyze and be able to take ideas and put them on your fretboard is very, very important. I think that can be super useful for guitar players. And again, you want to learn theory for a reason. You don't want to know it, because if you just know a bunch of random facts that you can't actually apply, then you might as well not know them at all if you're a guitar player. It might sound impressive, but if you can't use it, what is the point to that end? So there are areas in which I think it can be useful. Where I think it can be a hindrance, and this comes from my own personal experience, is when I started learning to play guitar, I didn't take the route where didn't go the route. It just worked out that way, that I would learn from. I learned just from some friends. I didn't do high school music or music in school, which was might be quite surprising considering my background and my education now. But so I did it because I really liked the guitar and I loved playing. And I would, learn songs, and luckily enough I found a teacher who was compatible with where I was at that point and helped me develop, the physicality and some basic skill sets in that regard. But what actually prompted me to want to learn musical theory was because I didn't do it at school, once I developed a passion for guitar playing and music, I couldn't actually just pick up school. I couldn't pick up the subject. Excuse me. So what actually prompted me to do that was I ended up picking up a module of a TAFE certificate at a nearby TAFE college, and it was a certificate for music. And I remember sitting in the class, and there was the guy who ran the class was a very, very good guitar player, the best I'd seen at that point. I think he'd studied at MIT in America for a bit. And I remember watching people, whether it be a composition or they're doing something on the guitar or trying to work something out. And I remember watching people go to him and go, "Oh, what's going on with this? I can't figure this out." And he just had an answer. He just had so many options on the table in ways in which he could provide a solution to what the problem the people were bringing to him. And I remember witnessing that and just going, wow, and that is power. That's the power of knowing music theory, but knowing it in a practical sense. He didn't just know textbooks. He'd obviously done umpteen gigs, decades as a guitar player, multiple decades. Don't want to assume his age. But, so seeing that firsthand, you can see the power of music theory. And I think that's, again, to underline that point, you have to know it to want to, or to be able to apply it. So very, very important. In that moment, seeing that, the effect that it could have and what you could do with it prompted me and really inspired me to go down the path that I went down in those following years. So, but if we bring this one back around to where it could be a hindrance, when I started learning, if I had to start learning theory, and this is why I think potentially a lot of beginners, it's just too early to get them, if they're a classical player, sure, if they're learning classical, or they're learning something where they're forced to play in ensembles, sure, whatever, reading, go for it. But I think in the beginning, we're just trying to work out what to do with our hands. We're trying to work out how to use this. We're trying to develop those fundamental skill sets, get them going, get it moving. And then on top of that, you're trying to learn what's another language. I think it's potentially too much to think about for a lot of people. And this is one of the reasons why with clients I work with who are quite cerebral and quite analytical and successful in their careers, it's the first few weeks or first few sessions you do with them, you almost have to they can't believe the way you actually have to approach things, because as a guitar player, talking physically, I can't remember what study it was. I should go look this up. But I remember reading in a book not too long ago, which was quite mind-blowing to me, was that the part of your brain which actually executes physical tasks, so it executes our motor skills, is a different part to actually what stores the theoretical information. So hence, you can study something to the point you can understand why what's going on is going on, why it's happening is happening, but doesn't mean you can execute it. And when you have to physically do something, whether it be playing a lick, playing a scale, playing a chord sequence, it comes from a different part of the brain. And that's why I think you have to look at being a guitarist and a musician as that's the intuitive part, that's the performing side of it. That's the part where magic happens. Theory doesn't really have a place in that, well, I should be careful with saying things like that, but theory should not be the main priority. The intellectual concept should not be the main priority. Your ability to express yourself and just being in that moment, that wonderful interplay of what's going on there, and that comes from one part of the brain, but the theoretical understanding of other things comes from the other side of the brain. And that's where I think a lot of people, you almost have to see it as two different things, but we have to develop the theoretical side to enhance what we can do on the musician side. So we've talked a little bit about there. I've shared some of my own experiences on where I think music theory can be helpful, or I know it's helpful, not can be, it is helpful. Where it can be a hindrance. So the big question, is music theory necessary as a guitar player? And look, I guess it's very tempting. People like to, do little quick videos on a lot of topics and have opinions and yes and no, but I just wanted to talk in more nuance about this. It obviously it's not 100% necessary, and that's been proven time and time again by just looking at great artists throughout history and great guitar players. Again, Jimi Hendrix, phenomenal, that probably doesn't describe it. I remember hearing a story actually, or I met Tommy Emmanuel once after a show, and talking to him about, he can't read. Absolutely, if you don't know Tommy Emmanuel, look up some of his stuff online. He's a phenomenal Australian guitarist, absolute phenomenal guitarist, like ridiculous, but wouldn't know whether a chart's upside down or not if you put one in front of him. But and people of this category have developed their musicianship and their intuition to a point where it's not a hindrance. Like, their musicianship transcends not having a theoretical understanding. Like, they are just masters of that domain, hence why they're great artists. So it's obviously not necessary, but I would say no, and I would say the reasons I've described to you earlier in this video, where it can be helpful, how it can be helpful, and I really didn't want to come in and do this video and go, no, you don't need to know it, because I think that would be irresponsible to say such a thing, because there's many ways to do this, to play the guitar. There's many approaches you can take to it, and it depends on your objective as well. If you want to be a classical guitarist and you don't want to read, well, yeah, that's a different one. Or it's not to say it's impossible, but it's not ideal. And it just depends on the situation. It's not necessary if you just want to play for your own enjoyment. But I think if you want to get into the areas of where you're composing ideas, you want to start analyzing what's going on with other musicians, other guitar players, I think it becomes more necessary and more helpful. So there we go, people. There's some musings, some ideas on, is music theory necessary as a guitar player? So I've really enjoyed thinking about this topic and putting some ideas out there, which hopefully are very, very helpful and provide some insights for you people with your own guitar playing. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like it, share it for people you think it might be useful for. If you want to support the channel, all that stuff is in the description below. If you want to get my help personally with any challenges you're facing with your guitar playing, you can follow the links below and book in when I have time free to work with you then. But if you have any questions, music theory questions, or anything else you'd like me to pull apart and discuss for you people out there, I'm more than happy to. We love hearing from you people, and Lewis and I both really, really love hearing from other guitar players, other musicians, and sharing some of our skills and our experiences and building a really cool community here of good ideas and helping people move forward with their playing. So this one's been a lot of fun. I look forward to catching up with you all in the next video. Until then, get after it, people. I'll catch up with you then.